Corpus Christi drops 91%. ExxonMobil drinks the city dry as 500,000 people face zero water. Say that out loud for a second. A Texas city of 500,000 people is staring down the barrel of running out of water in real time. The two reservoirs that have quietly fed this city for generations are now more than 90% empty. Lake Corpus Christi is hovering around 9% capacity. Choke Canyon is barely at 8%. Combined, the system that once felt endless is now less than 1/10 full. Inside the city, people are being threatened with a $500 fine for watering a lawn or washing a car. Residents are boiling eggs and saving the cooled water just to keep a few plants alive, counting every drop like it might be their last. And yet, while families ration tap water and watch the level in their sinks fall slower every day, 6 massive oil, steel, and petrochemical corporations have quietly drunk nearly 57 billion gallons of water over just 3 years. More than 3 times what every resident in the city used in the same period. This is not a natural accident. This is not just a drought. This is something far colder. The water did not run out by surprise. The water ran out by vote. 9 council members, 0 dissent, signed away a major slice of this city's future drinking water to a $10 billion plastics complex backed by ExxonMobil and the Saudi state petrochemical giant Sabis, before that plant had even produced a single pound of plastic pellets. The warnings were on the record. The warnings were ignored. The plant is still drinking. Now the reservoirs are collapsing. The river that feeds them is starving. The city manager wakes up every Tuesday morning and tells the public how many days of water are left. And somewhere on the Nueces River, in the middle of the night, a civil engineer lies awake doing the math and then goes back out to drill another emergency well in the dark. So here is the question that hangs over Corpus Christi, over Texas, and over every industrial city in America. How does a modern U.S. city of 500,000 people hand its drinking water to foreign-backed petrochemical plants on a 9-0 vote? And what happens when the taps finally run dry? This is Corpus Christi, the coastal bend. A Texas Gulf city of roughly 500,000 people, wrapped around a port and fed by a river that no longer has enough to give. For generations, Lake Corpus Christi and Choke Canyon Reservoir have quietly supplied the city. On maps, they look like 2 solid blue anchors holding the whole region together. In reality, those anchors have almost snapped. Lake Corpus Christi is sitting at about 9% capacity. Choke Canyon is at about 8%. The combined system that was once comfortably full is now somewhere under 1/10 of what it was designed to hold. If you drained a glass down to the last muddy swallow at the bottom, that is what the city's water security looks like right now. Every week, City Manager Peter Zanoni steps up with a public water supply update. It has become a ritual. Every Tuesday, he wakes up and tells the city how many days they have left before the system crosses the line from dangerous to disastrous. But he has also admitted something else. He is not in a rush to declare a level 1 emergency. Why? Because that declaration would finally force industrial users, the biggest drinkers in the system, to cut back. The city is, in his own words, trying to protect its local economy. So the emergency declaration keeps slipping down the road, while the timeline on the reservoirs runs like a lit fuse. In the background, another mind is running the math. A civil engineer assigned to the emergency well field says he wakes up almost every night thinking about the numbers. He knows exactly how many days the reservoirs have at current draw. He knows every well he can lease, every gallon he can squeeze out of groundwater that should have been developed 20 years ago. And he knows that what he is doing now is a band-aid on an artery that was cut by policy years before the drought hit. To understand how Corpus Christi ended up here, you have to peel back 5 layers. the dying watershed, the industrial thirst, the political capture, the displacement of neighborhoods, and the failure of the last resort. One by one, they stack on top of each other until the outcome looks inevitable. Start with the first layer, the watershed. More than 60% of Texas is now in severe drought or worse. The Nueces River, the lifeline feeding both Lake Corpus Christi and Choke Canyon, is starving. There is no miracle storm in the forecast, no hidden lake upstream that can just be opened like a tap. There is nothing on the radar that changes the math. Every day the sun burns down on dry pasture, on cracked riverbanks, on a river system that was already stressed before the drought tightened. Rainfall that once felt seasonal now feels like a rumor. When it does come, it is too little, too late, or it runs off too fast to refill anything meaningful. Drought is not just about empty lakes. It is about an entire region reshaping itself under heat. More than 60% of Texas being in severe drought, or worse, means streams shrinking, aquifers drawing down, and every community on that watershed line turning on deeper and deeper wells at the same time. That is why the civil engineer on the Nueces says the city should have diversified with groundwater 20 years ago. Back when wells were a backup, not an emergency. Back when the river still had time. Back when those decisions would have cost less and hurt fewer people. He is now leasing private wells and asking the state for emergency groundwater discharges, drilling along the river in the dark, and calling it what it is, a Band-Aid. But drought alone does not drain reservoirs this fast. Drought sets the stage. Something else is doing the heavy lifting, something with pipelines, smokestacks, and 31-cent water. The second layer is industrial demand. In Corpus Christi, it is not households that are drinking the city dry. It is refineries, petrochemical plants, and steel. More than 60% of the water that remains in the system now goes to industry, not to people. Look at the top 6 corporate customers alone. Together, over 3 years, they drank nearly 57 billion gallons of water. That is more than 3 times what every resident in the city used in the same period. While residents face $500 fines for trying to water a lawn, the plants that swallow the river are paying about 31 cents per 1,000 gallons and are legally exempt from the drought rules that punish households. The drought tightened on residents. It did not tighten on industry. During 2025, when the city was already in Stage 3 restrictions, the city's own water dashboard quietly recorded something almost unbelievable. Top industrial customers used more water during Stage 3 in 2025 than they did in 2022, when the reservoirs were still high. In other words, even as the alarm bells rang louder, even as public messaging told families to cut back, large industrial users actually increased their draw. The rules that strangle ordinary people stop at the gates of plants and refineries. Those facilities operate under contracts and exemptions that shield them from the full weight of the emergency. The city fines a resident for washing a car, but the complex that sucks down millions of gallons a day keeps operating under a rate that treats water like just another cheap input, not like the difference between a functioning city and mass displacement. Industrial demand is not a side story. It is the main character in this collapse. But it did not seize that role by force. It was handed the script in a council chamber, on a night when no one voted no. The third layer is political capture. Between 2023 and 2024, a political action committee calling itself the Coastal Bend Coalition stepped into Corpus Christi politics with a simple pitch: responsible government for the Coastal Bend. Behind that bland slogan was real money. The PAC spent roughly $250,000 on city council races, serious weight in a local election. It backed a slate of candidates, and that slate won seats. Once in power, the worldview came into focus. One current councilman, Roland Barrera, summed it up in 5 words: water is a commodity. That phrase explains almost everything that follows. If water is a commodity, it is something to be traded, priced, and allocated to whoever pays, not something held in trust for the people who live on it. If water is a commodity, then giving huge blocks of it to petrochemical complexes looks like economic development, not like siphoning off the city's lifeline. If water is a commodity, then it makes sense to delay a Level 1 emergency declaration because you are protecting the local economy, even as the reservoir levels drop into the single digits. Years earlier, before 2021, that mindset translated into a pivotal decision. The City Council signed an agreement allocating a major share of municipal water to a new petrochemical complex called Gulf Coast Growth Ventures, a $10 billion joint venture between ExxonMobil and Saudi state company SABIC. The vote, 9-0. Former councilman Jim Klein warned the council on the record that the city did not have the water to give. The council gave it anyway. In late 2021, the Gulf Coast Growth Ventures plant came online. Around the same window, Steel Dynamics opened a major mill. Industrial demand surged, the river sagged, the reservoirs started their long slide down. By 2025, while the city moved into Stage 3 restrictions, another big decision landed: a proposed desalination plant at the Inner Harbor. The project's price tag had grown from a couple $100 million to $750 million, then to $1.2 billion. The brine discharge would have killed marine life in the bay, and the loan structure would have stacked more than $100 million in interest and operations costs on top. In September 2025, the council voted it down. Texas Governor Greg Abbott publicly accused the council of squandering a lifeline. But by then, the deeper problem was already locked in. The water was gone on paper long before it disappeared from the lakes. The fourth layer is class displacement, the human geography of who gets pushed where when industry expands. On the shore of the port of Corpus Christi sits Hillcrest, a historically black neighborhood opened to African American families in 1944, right as the first refineries began rising around it. Over decades, those refineries bought out homes one by one. Streets vanished. Entire blocks were bulldozed. Mona Little has lived in Hillcrest her entire life. She remembers a time when her community had property everywhere. Now, she says, it is just a few of us. She looks up at the cooling tower plumes hanging over her street and calls them the dragon's smoke. She says, all we are is just a location. We are a pot of gold that they want. When you zoom out, you see what she means. Industry Row stretches more than 20 miles along the Inner Harbor. Hillcrest is hemmed in on three sides by refineries and plants, the same institutions that were allowed to drink. Most of the city's remaining water are the ones that slowly erase the neighborhood around Mona, house by house, lot by lot. Class and race are not side notes. They are part of the same pattern. The same political logic that treats water as a commodity also treats certain neighborhoods as expendable buffer zones for heavy industry. In Hillcrest, the dragon's smoke keeps rising while houses keep emptying. Now, as the city's water disappears, that long history of displacement collides with a new kind of threat. When taps start to sputter, it will be neighborhoods like Hillcrest that feel the hardest edge of scarcity and pollution at the same time. The fifth layer is the failure of the last resort. The Inner Harbor desalination plant was sold as the project that would save the city from exactly this moment. It would draw seawater, strip out the salt, and feed a thirsty city and its industries with a new, seemingly endless source. But by the time the council had to make a final call, the details had turned toxic. The brine discharge from the plant would have choked marine life in the bay, threatening fisheries and ecosystems that local communities depend on. The cost had tripled, climbing from a few $100 million to $750 million, then to $1.2 billion. The loan terms alone would have strapped the city with more than $100 million in extra interest and operating costs. In September 2025, as lakes kept dropping and drought kept deepening, the council voted the desalination plant down. The civil engineer now running the emergency well drilling had a blunt reaction. The city should have diversified with groundwater 20 years earlier. It did not. Now he is drilling along the Nueces River, leasing private wells, and asking the state for emergency groundwater discharges. He knows every new well is temporary. He calls it a band-aid, and that is why he is not sleeping. The supposed lifeline was too late, too expensive, and too damaging to the bay to pass. So instead of a planned, robust backup system, Corpus Christi ended up with hurried rigs along a shrinking river and a desperate race to stay ahead of the math. As those 5 layers lock into place, drought, industrial overuse, captured politics, displaced communities, failed last resort planning, the impact begins to spill beyond city limits. Because the impact does not stay local. Across Corpus Christi, 500,000 people sit under Stage 3 restrictions. They cannot water lawns, they cannot wash cars, they can be fined $500 for trying. In some homes, people boil eggs and then save the cooled water to pour onto their plants, stretching every molecule as far as they can. The community organizer Isabel Araiza saw what was happening and decided to push back. She founded a coalition called For the Greater Good and is now driving a Fair Water Amendment for the November 2026 ballot. The goal? End the industrial drought surcharge exemption that lets big plants keep drinking while residents are squeezed. She says she wants to be able to say, "We're going to win." Then she adds, "We just haven't won yet." Regionally, the signal is even more alarming. Texas is running out of cities to keep cool. 3 rivers, Alice, Beeville, every town along the Nueces is drilling for groundwater, competing for the same shrinking reserves. What once looked like individual city problems now looks like one connected crisis up and down the river. Nationally, the precedent is the part almost no one is willing to say out loud. If a Texas city of 500,000 people can sign away its drinking water to a foreign-backed petrochemical plant on a 9-0 vote, using the same kind of contract structure found in industrial cities across the country, then every other industrial city in the United States could be sitting on the same ticking time bomb. There is one modern case that comes close. Cape Town, South Africa, in 2018. The only major city in recent history that came within days of its municipal taps going dry. Cape Town pulled back from day 0 with aggressive conservation, deep agricultural cuts, and a blast of lucky rain. Corpus Christi does not have those levers in the same way. Residents are already conserving. Industry will not voluntarily cut. The rain is not coming. So what happens next? The city is now months, not years, from a formal Level 1 emergency. That declaration will finally force the question that has been avoided for years. Who cuts first when there is not enough water for everyone? Bob Paulson, who runs the local industry group, has already made one thing very clear. The refineries will not voluntarily shut down, even at Level 1. Pressed on how much time is left, he answered with a sentence that feels like a threat and a shrug at the same time. We're not out of time until we're out of time. On the policy side, the Fair Water Amendment will go to the ballot in November 2026, asking voters to strip away the industrial drought surcharge exemption and rebalance who pays when water runs short. Behind closed doors, the controversial desalination plant has been quietly put back on the table, this time at an even higher price and on a slower timeline. At the same time, emergency drilling along the Nueces is accelerating. Crews are moving rigs from site to site, trying to tap every feasible pocket of groundwater before the reservoirs fall too far. Each well that comes online adds a few more days, maybe a few more weeks, to the timeline. But none of them change the core equation. You cannot drill your way out of a watershed that is drying from the sky down. In neighborhoods like Hillcrest, people live with a double exposure. They breathe the dragon smoke that rises from cooling towers over their homes, and they listen to warnings that the city could see its taps slowed, rationed, or shut. For them, the idea of protecting the local economy is not an abstract phrase. It is a trade-off written in asthma, in property loss, in worry about what happens when the water and the jobs are both on the line. Families across the city are already rehearsing what a level 1 emergency might look like. They store extra jugs. They talk about which relatives they could stay with in other towns if it gets really bad. They argue over whether to stay and fight or leave before things tip into something uglier. Local churches, neighborhood associations, and mutual aid groups are starting to fill in the gaps that policy has left open. They are organizing water drives, setting up phone trees to check on elders, and teaching people how to stretch what they have without risking their health. In living rooms and community centers, people are asking the questions that never make it into official press conferences. Who gets protected first if the system truly fails? Whose neighborhood gets the last steady pressure in the pipes, and whose faucets are allowed to cough air? At the same time, young people in Corpus Christi are watching this unfold and drawing their own conclusions. Some are turning toward activism, joining coalitions like For the Greater Good, or planning to run for office themselves. Others are quietly planning their exit, deciding that a city willing to trade its water for plastics and steel is not a place they can build a future. The brain drain is invisible on a water dashboard, but it is real. There is also a quieter shift happening inside the city's institutions. Engineers, planners, and even some staffers inside local government are starting to treat this crisis as a line that cannot be crossed twice. They are sketching out what a truly diversified water portfolio would look like, one that balances surface water, groundwater, conservation, and any future desalination under rules that protect people first instead of last. None of that fixes the present, but it shows that even inside a captured system, not everyone is willing to repeat the same gamble. None of these threads have closed. All of them are still moving. Does ExxonMobil stop? Does the council reverse the vote it took before the plant existed? Does Hillcrest survive another round of industrial encroachment? Does the rain come in enough volume and at the right time to buy the city another year? Right now, none of those questions has an answer. What does have an answer is the present tense. The city manager is filing his next update on Tuesday. The dragon smoke is still rising over the harbor. The reservoirs are still dropping. The refineries are still drinking. The fines are still being issued. The ballot is still being printed. And somewhere along the Nueces River, under a dark Texas sky, a civil engineer is drilling another well, knowing that each new hole he opens is not a solution, but a delay. The story of Corpus Christi is not just a drought story, not just a Texas story, and not just a local political drama. It is a warning shot for every city that treats water as a commodity, every council that trades long-term security for short-term industry, and every community that wakes up one day to find that the lake they thought would always be there is suddenly, quietly, almost gone. The fuse is burning. The contract is signed. The wells are drilling. And the real question is no longer, how did this happen? It is, who runs out first? The lakes, the wells, or the patience of 500,000 people who were never really told what they traded away? Because in the end, this is not just about one city's bad luck with rain, or one council's bad vote on a single contract. It is a test of what we think a city is for, and who it belongs to when resources run low. If Corpus Christi can claw its way back from the edge, It will not be because the drought showed mercy. It will be because ordinary people decided that water is not just a commodity to be sold off, but a promise that has to be defended.